All right, we have 3 more problems to complete our practice exam. The first one on this page is going to be to solve this inequality. Notice this is a compound inequality. We've got a less than or equal here and a less than over here. So we've got really 3 sections, and I need to get x by itself in the middle section. So the first thing I do is get rid of this 11 by subtracting 11, and I can't say from both sides, I need to say from all 3 sections. And that looks like we'll get a negative 15 on the left, less or equal. Let's see, that just cancels. So negative 4x in the middle, strict less than, 17 minus 11, looks like 6. Now to get x completely by itself, we have to divide by negative 4, all 3 sections. And what do we need to do when we divide by a negative number? Reverse the inequalities. So this one is going to become greater or equal, and this one will be strictly greater. And we get x by itself in the middle. And this would reduce to 3 over 2, negative 3 over 2. And this would be positive 15 over 4. Now be real careful here. Your interval does not go from 15 over 4 to negative 3 over 2. Notice 15 over 4 is the big number. When we want to write intervals, we always want to have the x in the middle with either less than or equals on either side, and a number here and a number here. And the interval would go from this number to this number. This would be the left number, this would be the right number. So I'm going to take this entire inequality and flip it around. All right, so x stays in the middle, negative 3 over 2, less or equal to 15 over 4. These are absolutely equivalent. Basically, it's like saying, just as an example, y less than 3 is the same as 3 greater than y. That's all we did. Notice that the pointy side is towards a y. Here, again, the pointy side is towards a y. Here, the pointy side is towards a negative 3 over 2, just like it is here. And the pointy side is towards the x in this one, when we have the 15 over 4. Just flipped it all the way around. And now we can say that the interval is negative 3 over 2, comma 15 over 4, but this one has the equals, so this will be a square bracket. This one will be a rounded bracket, parentheses. So negative 3 over 2, comma 15 over 4 with a square bracket. And once we have that, it's very simple to just put a negative 3 over 2 there, put a 15 over 4 here, put an open circle in the negative 3 over 2 and a closed filled-in circle on the 15 over 4 because of the round bracket and the square bracket, and shade everything in between. That's it. Okay, our last 2 problems are going to be absolute value inequalities, which give some students a hard time. The first thing we want to do is get, as frequently as with a radical equation or with a rational exponent equation, get the absolute value all by itself on one side. So let's subtract 20 from both sides. And that would give us a negative 2 times the absolute value of 4x minus 3, less or equal negative 20. So now I want to take this negative 2 and get rid of it. So divide both sides by negative 2, which means what? I divided both sides by negative 2, so that means I need to reverse the inequality. So these negative 2's cancel here, leaving us 4x minus 3 in absolute values, and this would be a positive 10. So now we have a fairly simple problem to solve. But before we do it, I want you to think, maybe even say it out loud, what is the solution going to look like here? It's greater than or equal, which means I'm going to have 2 numbers shaded in filled in completely because of the equals. And I'm either going to shade in between, or I'm going to shade the two regions going outward from these 2 points. Because it's greater than or equal, it's going to be 2 of them. So really, all I need to do now is solve 2 equations. The absolute, I really just need to solve 4x minus 3 without absolute values. 4x minus 3 equals 10. I'll do negative first. And 4x minus 3 equals 10. That's all we have to do. And this will give us the 2 numbers that we'll write here, and we'll write here, and we're going to shade outwards. Okay, so I sometimes call these the 2 magic numbers. And let's review why I do negative 10 and 10 here. I want to know which 2 numbers make this exactly equal to 10. Okay, so that means either if 4x minus 3 is equal to 10, well, the absolute value of 10 is 10. The negative 10 is because if 4x minus 3 equals negative 10, negative 10 inside absolute values gives you 10 again. So let's solve these individually. Add 3 to get 4x equals negative 7. Divide both sides by by 4. And we get negative 7 over 4. And this one will add 3 to both sides. And this will give us 4x equals 13. And x equals 13 over 4. So we're going to have negative, this number here is negative 7 over 4. And this one is going to be 13 over 4. Let's write this as an interval, which anytime there's 2 intervals, you always need a union. So the first interval is going to be this, negative infinity to negative 7 over 4, with a square bracket on the negative 7 over 4. You never put a square bracket on the infinity, or a negative infinity. And then we'll say union with another square bracket, 13 over 4, comma, infinity. There we go. So what this means is if you took any number that's shaded from 13 over 4, what is that, equal to 3 1/4? If you took 3 1/2 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 100 or 1,000,000 and plug it in here, you're going to get, this inequality is going to hold. If you plugged in a negative 7 over 4 or a negative 8 over 4, which would be negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 10, negative 1,000,000, it's also going to work. If you take any number that's strictly in between these 2 numbers, for example 0, and plug it in here, it's going to fail. Let's verify that. If I plug in a 0, we're going to get 0 minus 3 in absolute values becomes 3. So 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. Negative 6 plus 20, though, is 14, and 14 is not less than 0. So no number inside here is going to work. Okay, we have one more to go. This one looks much easier. Yeah, it does have a fraction in it, so I hope that doesn't make any of you panic. This is easier because we already have the absolute value isolated. So what can we, before doing any arithmetic, what can we say about this? What's the solution going to look like? Well, we're going to get 2 numbers like we always do with an absolute value, and they're going to be not filled in but open circles. And I already know, since it's absolute value less than, we're shading in the middle. So all we need to worry about is getting these 2 magic numbers, just like we did up here. Only up here, it was an absolute value greater than or equal. That means you shade outward. Less than or equal means you shade in between the 2. So we just need to write 2 equations. 8 minus 4/3 x equals negative 7, and 8 minus 4/3 x equals positive 7. those two numbers are going to give us the magic numbers that we'll write here, and it will give us the interval. So if we subtract 8 from both sides, this 8 would go away, and it would get a -8 and a -7, which is -15. And how do we get x by itself? Well, if it's multiplied by a fraction, having a coefficient that's a fraction in front of the x, well, we just multiply by the reciprocal on both sides. -3/4, -3/4. So this all cancels out, leaving us x by itself. And what do we get here? Positive, this is like -15/1. So -15 times 3 is 45/4, and we can't simplify that at all. So that's it. Okay, over here, when we subtract 8, I'm going to get -4/3 x equals -1, because I subtracted 8 from both sides. That's why I have the -1 here. And to get x by itself, we multiply by, again, -3/4 on both sides. And that cancels out, giving us x by itself equals a positive number. It's a +3/4. Okay, so we need to make sure now that we put them in the correct order. The small number goes here, big number goes here. So 3/4 is obviously the small one, and 45/4, the big one. So that's the graph, and the interval is simply going to be 3/4, comma, 45/4 in parentheses. So just to review the last two problems, once you get it written into the standard form where you have an absolute value all by itself on one side, like right here and right here, we started off with that situation in this problem. If it's a greater than or equal, you know that you are going to shade outward from the two magic numbers. And by the way, the magic numbers are just the solution to, in this case, it was 4x minus 3 equals 10. So that means that the inside you can either have a 10 or a -10. That's why we have 10 here, -10 here. And then down here, when it's absolute value less than or equal, you only have one interval. You shade everything between those two magic values. And that you can get the magic values by setting 8 minus 4/3 x in absolute values equal to 7, which means you want this inside the absolute values either to be 7 or -7, because the absolute values will turn it into a +7. That's why we did it up here. 8 minus 4/3 x is -7. 8 minus 4/3 x is +7. And we got two numbers, our two magic numbers, and we plotted them here on the number line, and they gave us the appropriate interval.